Windows Millennium Edition was bad. It would freeze, it would constantly crash, and sometimes it wouldn't even shut down properly. It was a rush job to get the product out for Christmas sales and came pre-installed with several brand PCs. So many users of the image board website Futaba Channel, more specifically in the Nijiura board, were owners of such operational system, and they would constantly state their indignations about it, especially looking around and seeing other users who had Windows 2000 and the new cutting-edge Windows XP, and eventually their heads got a bit weird from dealing with the OS that they started commenting things like, "It's kinda cute how useless it is." And on the other side of the coin, "I can't keep up with this unless it becomes a moe character or something." This is Windows ME. Nee-san. In August 2003, about 2 hours after users started coming up with an anime girl version of Windows ME, this one who looks troubled came out. It had some improvements done, and to this day, it is accepted as the moe design of Windows ME, and became the starting point of something much bigger. As the threads passed by, and even throughout the years, her personality started setting in. Due to the OS being unstable, she became a very clumsy character, a natural airhead troublemaker, and eventually just a stupid character. She was born as a maid character and would work very hard for her masters, Toshiakis, which was the default name for users on the Nijiura board, and can be represented as this face or a square bracket, depending on where and when the discussion is happening. Please check the Nijiura Maid's video later for more detail. She would freeze in place, she would destroy important files, she would fail to defragment the disk, usually represented by her playing with stacking blocks, amongst other failures as a clumsy girl. A common sentence related to her is Ctrl-Alt-Delete. Due to malfunctioning, she does questionable things, such as microwaving things that shouldn't be microwaved. She is well seen holding a leak. Some theories exist as to why that is. The theory I've seen the most is that it's the name of a Japanese-made personal firewall, Negie's, Negie being Japanese for leak. Another one is that it's the weapon used by Donpachi from Baba, known as Donpachi's sword. Another one is that it's green, so it fits her. The last one was that she was also frequently portrayed holding something that resembles a crowbar, and because of how dangerous that would be on her hands, she was made to hold a leak. By the way, you might have heard the term, something that resembles a crowbar. That is a Japanese meme referencing news reports that says things like, "The criminal has used something that resembles a crowbar to get in."
ドアの隙間にバールのようなものを差し込み、無理やりこじ開けようとしますが、うまくいきません。
If it's reported like this, it's usually unclear if it really was a crowbar. But on the internet, anime, and otaku-related stuff, it is just clearly a crowbar. Her favorite food is roll cakes due to eating a whole roll cake in Setsubun, thinking it was an ehomaki. Also, according to the creator, usually people point out she's based on Kyanaru from Lost Universe, but he thought it was more based on Tesse from Waku Waku 7 and Maruchi from Two Heart. At one point, the maid attribute in the board started being focused on the Nijiura maids, so she started being treated less as a maid and more doted as a daughter or waifu. She is a very well-loved character. Windows 2000, pronounced Nikei, Nikei or Nikei, doesn't seem to matter that much, was an OS released about the same time as Windows ME, but it was stable and ran well. As for the character, she acts composed and holds an older sister role contrasting to Nee-san, despite technically being her younger sister. Frequently drawn with a serious personality, works hard for others behind the scenes and feels like a career woman, a cool beauty, but who also might have a hard time expressing herself due to that. From very early on, her catchphrase was, "It's because I'm a reliable woman." But also because of this, she constantly falls into unfavorable roles and has a tendency for misfortune. Sometimes is portrayed as just fed up. When Microsoft was ending support to Windows 2000, she was becoming increasingly aware of her retirement. She is portrayed sometimes with more focus on cat-like features and without her coat, to which she's called Nikei. She is also bad with alcohol. Now, there is a saying in Nijura, perhaps even an internet urban legend. Strong women are weak in the ass. The source of this saying is from a school rumble doujinshi called Slave Rumble 4. There is no basis for the statement, but some people want to believe it's true inside their hearts. That, alongside the reading of 2K, you invert it, you get K2, and it sounds like Ketsu, which means ass. 2000 became a character that relates to taking it backdoor. Some posters even lovingly call her Do Anaru. At first, Windows XP was portrayed wearing a bikini, but with the release of XP Service Pack 2, she was redesigned to the clothing more commonly seen nowadays. Windows XP was both good for playing and for work, but due to needing a machine with specs relatively high, she ended up with a glamorous body compared to Mitan and 2000, and became very popular with posters that liked chubbier characters. Also, due to the memory resources needed when in operation, she became a character that likes eating a lot, sometimes to the point she is portrayed as a pig. Her favorite food is beef bowl from Yoshinoya, and she is banned from entering stores with food challenges that lets you eat for free if you finish the meal. She also has a big chest, due to it getting bigger the more memory an OS has. If you write XP in a Japanese keyboard, you get Sase, so she is commonly called Saseko. But Sase can also be understood as letting someone do something. That alongside her height-spec body, you can imagine how she was treated in Nijura. And for people who don't like calling her Saseko, others call her Pekepi, which is a broken way of saying XP in Japanese because saying XP every time is annoying. These three characters were the first three big ones and paved the way to further the OS tongue boom. Before I get to the rest of the family, I want to give a quick thanks to my dealer, Squadalo, who handed me every OS tongue warehouse there was. Every picture and thread you'll be seeing here is thanks to him. And a shout out to Gab and Dede. It wasn't directly, but you guys ended up helping me a lot. So here's the rest of the family. Windows 3.1 is also known as Oobaba-sama, great-grandmother, due to being one of the very early Windows operating systems released. At first, she was portrayed as simply this white square, with a 3.1 written on it, but later on her design evolved into that of a Gofrori, when users were refining OS-related characters and she was made into a young girl on the outside but who spoke like an old person, a Rori Baba. Besides her age, she's extremely energetic and playful, very mischievous and childish. Due to Windows 3.1 requiring MS-DOS and not being able to run on its own, she is frequently seen with a black cat that represents MS-DOS, who can also turn into a cat girl with the voice of Otsuka Akio, and whoever sees her speaking gets their wrists broken like Steven Seagal would do it. Oobaba-sama is very fond of the posters in Nijura. Ever since she became a Rori Baba, she kept developing their friendship, a very deep sort of friendship. Also, for some reason, she calls them pussy. She also used to own the place called Junk Dormitory, based on the homemade computer called Junk in Denko Chojin Griddoman, that released at about the same time Windows 3.1 did. There, she met a man called Midorikawa and they had a daughter. Windows 95 usually called older sister, Nee-san. At first, she was drawn as a grandma because it was an older OS, but tons of other designs started being offered, and eventually it was decided that the one that retained the Japanese style of the grandma would be picked. She makes use of a sword called Ringokiri, which means apple cutter, a reference to her time fighting in the Great OS War between Microsoft OSs and the Mac OSs. The pattern on her kimono is based on the Windows 95 Japanese version wallpaper Hanami, flower viewing. Despite looking young again, she is still treated as if she's old and is conscious of her age. She is frequently called a granny, and it's not uncommon to see comments calling her that, to have slashes in the middle of it to represent whoever's saying that being cut down by her. She is represented by an eternally smiling cow emoji, even when punishing the posters of the board for doing things they shouldn't have. But that also means she acts as the older sister to all the others and acts like a mother character. She does say ara ara. When Windows 95 became 14 years old in 2009, she kept saying she was 14. She has a tendency to cosplay, due to this being the OS where changing wallpapers became commonplace. She is part of the furry pair because when you add their ages together, it's furry and no other reason beyond that. She once got infected by a virus and started recommending the sweet akafuku to others and kept making them eat it to the point even Windows XP became traumatized by it. There are two Windows 98 girls. At first, they were designed to the likeness of Vulcan 3000 from Zetbel, because on the very beginning, people didn't know the OS 10 would become a bigger thing, so they were just throwing out ideas on the spot. Eventually, redesigns were made, and the one that had the most impact was the one that brought up the idea there were girls inside the Vulcans, and these girls became the accepted designs, Hacchan and Secchan, who are usually seen together. Hacchan is portrayed akin to a middle schooler, usually calm and reserved, but also depending on the situation she can be quite sadistic. At one point, she was something close to a Chunibyo character, but Itai-san, the Nijura maid, took that spot, but they also seem to have bonded from it. Because she calls herself Boku, usually used for boys, she was treated as if she had a male member. But in the end, it was decided that she didn't necessarily have one, but she could attach one through USB. The Vulcans have a will of their own and can move by themselves. Her sister, Secchan, who represents Windows 98 2nd edition, is frequently seen with Hacchan and initially was portrayed as quite shy. But perhaps due to the traumas regarding the USB, her character became centered in trying to pluck them out. She carries a bottle opener with her at all times. Most times, her targets are the posters in Nijura or other male characters. She even has a catchphrase that reflects her hatred. She also likes to say Mau Mau. And unrelated to all that, she is quite fond of pro wrestling. At first, the Windows server was a girl who wore a fish costume due to a wordplay of server and Saba, which means mackerel. It is common to use the kanji for mackerel to describe a server online, but the design got forgotten in time, and when it was digged back up, she was defined by her appearance and became a half-fish character. Due to half of her computing ability being used in managing the server, her speech is very simplistic. She can form sentences, but most of the time, she only says wa ero or tobimasu, as in I'm flying, I'm jumping. Her privates are also covered by a patch, and almost always there is an arrow pointing out to it with the caption Private Covering Patch. One theory was that it represented a revision patch being placed on the software, but another one is just that it would be embarrassing for a girl to just walk around like that, and this is the result after people were wondering how to cover up a fish. She is a surprisingly very versatile character and managed to befriend several others. For example, the Nijura maids Usai-san, the rabbit maid that find things annoying, and Utagai-san, the doubtful maid. There are also many other types of servers, such as 2000 Saba and Ojo-Saba. This one speaking like an Ojo-sama, although her lines are pretty much the same and having an 18-karat gold private patch. And because of them, the usual Windows server is denominated as the normal one. She doesn't seem to really like that. Because she's cute, posters like to feed her gluten. She doesn't seem to really like that. The other servers don't really appear much unless with the normal server, but when they're together, they play around a lot, and usually are witnessed by the character Kitty-san, one of the derivatives of Yuki-san from Suigetsu. XP Home was one of the first designs to ever come up for the OS done, but people weren't sure how to use it. Eventually the Windows XP packages became professional being blue and Home being green, and that helped the design, but she was still a rare OS girl. Her character never developed until someone posted on IMG a thread about how XP Home was not being drawn. Someone else said if you call her Homeko, she sounds cute. Another post pointed out how it sounds like Homoko, and the conclusion was that she was a Fujoshi. And due to that being a unique attribute in the OS girls, she became quite popular. A character that suffers delusions of coupling guys and even inanimate objects, sometimes concepts. Her original outfit was replaced by a tracksuit, but she does wear it sometimes as cosplay in events. She draws doujinshi and she seems to very much enjoy whenever the PP land opens its doors. She is a shotacon. Despite her lifestyle, she still has a nice body due to being a Windows XP. It is customary for posters to reply with Homeko, control yourself. Windows NT had few designs at first, an office lady type design and a girl with a dress with NT written on it comes to attention, but she was forgotten due to having little people who had the OS in Futaba. When they tried remembering how NT was, they only remembered the girl in the dress, and that became the Windows NT. Due to Windows NT being the base of 2000 and XP, she became a mom character called NT Maman. But due to her character overlapping with Windows 95, she didn't get to appear too much. And now let's talk about controversy. One day, a doujinshi group called Deja Vu Artworks started releasing a series of online comics with the OS-ton characters called Shared FolDa. And they were not liked at all by Futaba members. Futaba members were already apprehensive due to a previous happening that I'll be talking about a little bit later, but they thought Deja Vu Artworks were using these characters as if it were their own. And the situation escalated due to members of Futaba and Deja Vu Artworks having back and forths, Deja Vu Artworks members making snide remarks towards Futaba posters, and them turning the characters that had poisonous elements, you could say, which was characteristic of Futaba, into standard moe characters, amongst other reasons. When Deja Vu Artworks created their version of Windows NT, and it was very similar to the already existing Windows 2000, Futaba members went on to develop and adopt their own Windows NT as a response. It all started when one member, who actually is the same poster who created Mitan, thought the idea of NT being read as Inu, dog, and T was interesting, so he drew the NT design with hair that looks like dog ears. And that design was developed more and more to end up with an actual dog girl called Inu-T. Her personality is based on NT being robust, not having many features, and being a central network operating system. I'm not really sure if I'm getting the last one right, but what that all leads to is robust, meaning doing things when they have to be done, like a watchdog, not having many features, leading to being a natural idiot. Also, she doesn't seem to have a sense of shame due to that, and central network being read as Secchan, which is the same reading as loyal dog. Although she is technically part of the OS family, she is treated more like a pet and is not allowed inside the house by Windows 2000, most likely because she makes a big mess, although she does keep trying to get inside. It is a little bit sad that she stays on a doghouse outside, but turns out she has a huge elaborate secret underground facility under it. She is the leader of the Inu-Dan, composed of her, the Chinese Nijura maid Kontong-san, who is a self-proclaimed evil god who loves mint chocolate but hates brushing her teeth, and Akuma Gaoru, who is very likely the weakest demon in all of the Nijuras. At first, they were just coming up with plans to get inside the house, and they would have conflicts with 2000, but later they just started gathering together to play around. Inu-T is sometimes seen playing with Shitsuji-kun, which is a character that plays on the word Shitsuji, meaning butler, and Hitsuji, meaning sheep. He is a herbivorous, both physically and mentally. Sometimes their relationship crosses the line to romantic, but it might be more in the sense of the strong prey on the weak, the law of the jungle, you know? Her catchphrase is "wafoo" that appears on the end of every sentence. Sometimes she just says that. She is sometimes portrayed as Snoopy due to a long-running series of posts called Inu-P, or Inu-T's Everyday Life. Due to Inu-T's appearance, Auntie Maman's character also started being portrayed more as a mummy character compared to her previous design, and it was revealed that she had Inu-T with Deca Master, also known as Doggy Kruger from Deca Ranger, who lives separately so he doesn't bring danger to his family. Inu-T doesn't seem to know he's her father, but she knows whenever he appears in the house, Auntie Maman becomes happy. Windows CE is a little fairy due to the operation system being aimed for mobile/portable use. She is a menace, I tell you that. At first, she was not notable due to not many users having experience with the OS until she appeared holding her USB stick, proclaiming she just wanted to stick that into the Toshiakis with a big smile on her face. And then she went out of control. As a quick reminder, Toshiaki was the default name of the posters in the Nijura board at the time. Every day she hunts the posters of Nijura, who lets their guard down and shoves that USB stick in. And eventually she even started bringing other things, like forks, dry sardines, centipedes, guitars, rulers and recorders. She is treated by them as a harmful insect. Sometimes they even spray her with bug spray, and sometimes she also attacks in numbers. She is a member of a group in Nijura called the Small Things Club, alongside the Nijura maid Chikoi-san, Makibishi-tan, a personification of Caltrops, Omutan, a personification of Crane Games, and Windows Mobile, which I'm talking about just after this. Drills, razors, gun, psycho gun, hook and wooden leg, Pocky, the one with peanuts, stylus, tuning fork. To achieve her objective, she makes good use of trickery as shown on a series of threads where she makes use of made-up stories regarding tales, traditions, or whatever sort of thing that might sound half believable, which will always be replied with, "You always surprise me, see? Yes. Now please lie on your back." 7-branch sword, candles for your birthday, bamboo decoration for Tanabata, Type 5 attack mine, a lightsaber, a great thing, raising heart, spear of Longinus. One time CE hit her head and became Shii-san, a modest and lovely girl who remembers nothing about her past and started doing odd jobs such as putting strawberries on top of roll cakes. Eventually she was portrayed being in a pure romantic relationship with the posters of the board to the point they started living a happy life together. But all good things come to an end, and she eventually got better and became a menace once again. Log, 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 log. Windows Mobile, also known as Mobiko or Mantis, is also a menace in a very similar way to CE. At first they were antagonistic towards each other, but later it was not unlikely to see them together due to their objectives. The way she is a menace to the posters in Nijura is that she aims to slice their virgin line. If you don't know what that is, it is a concept born from a short tale on the manga Young Tanaka Keiichi, which describes a time where the mangaka Tanaka Keiichi was tricked into believing having your first time is not only painful to women but to men as well due to it getting ripped on the act. Now, I'm fairly sure you can guess where the virgin line is, and I'm sure you don't like imagining that getting sliced, so I'm moving on. Windows 1.0, also known as Oichi-san, represents the first major release by Microsoft, so she's quite old-fashioned and acts calm most of the time. She likes origami due to the fact that Windows 1.1 not being able to place windows on top of each other, so they were lined up like origami folds. She also likes reversing, is familiar with old technology but doesn't seem to understand more modern stuff. Calls the posters of the board Koappa, which means boy or brat. Quite likes Yokan. She likes the beans coarse. She is one of the only characters in a position to pamper Oobaba-sama Windows 3.1, but she's also frequently in a position where she's mad at her antics, making her release beams from her eyes. Also gets coerced by Windows 3.1 to wear all sorts of costumes. Windows 97, also known as Nana-chan, is an interesting character. She likes to finish her sentences with aru, like a stereotypical Chinese character. She has 97 written on her forehead and she's obsessed with popularity. Sometimes there are posts on the board trying to appeal her as a proper OS and not as a Chinese counterfeit. Threads about how to spread her popularity and singing praises about her that are clearly not created by her. Comments praising her that are clearly not posted by her. Sometimes there's comments that are in full Chinese but were also not done by her. The following sentence, which I just hope it means Windows 97 overwhelming death by Moe, is well used alongside her. XP Media Center Edition is the youngest sisters of the XP girls. The first one is Moseko because of the abbreviation MCE. She has a serene personality, absent-minded even, and is content with her minor character position. She also eats a lot due to being XP Pro's little sister. She is very fond of Windows 97, treating her like a little sister even though she's technically older than her. Because there's 3 versions of Windows Media Center, there were plans to make 3 different characters, but who is which version wasn't decided. The other 2 are Gigeko, a short-haired girl, and her name comes from the fact she has a guitar and wear geta shoes, and the last sister is Moso-sensei, who appeared even less than the previous 2, so it's hard to tell what she's like. Windows Vista was the first OS to be released after the start of the OS X boom, and due to that, there were a great amount of designs created from general threads that will be viewed several times a day in the May board. Apparently there were over 200 designs created. There were even designs created only using the code name of Windows Vista, Longhorn. It became hard to decide on the one Windows Vista, so I'm going to talk about some of the characters that gained some traction. Vistake is a very interesting OS X in that she's a total outlier on the OS X sphere. Because she wasn't based on Windows Vista, she was entirely based on the person that posted her design. Because the original drawing was under a handle name instead of the default name, people found out the creator name to be Takehiro. Vis for Vista, Take for Takehiro. The character traits as well was based on the artist. The reason as to why she carries a scythe is because Takehiro worked as a gardener and on the fields. So Vistake is frequently seen with the scythe and other tools that will be used in such job. But the biggest defining characteristic of Vistake is her jealousy towards good artists. Based on several blog posts where Takehiro kept mentioning godly artists with a tinge of envy. Whenever she tries to draw, she gets fired up, but it usually doesn't go well. Sometimes she gets so mad from envy she cries tears of blood, and her catchphrase is "Godly artists go die for real" and variations of it. She can be seen sometimes with Bob Ross and Hitokaku-sensei, the self-portrait mascot of the website and book series It's Fun to Draw People, due to the idea that one should have fun drawing and not beating themselves over it. But that too ends up being another source of despair for her and her self-torturing tendencies. The reason she has a screw on her forehead is due to this being screw, word originally from French. One of the standard replies on her threads is Vistake will become a good mother. Even though she's not really based on the OS itself, she became one of, if not the most popular representation of Windows Vista in the OS ton. Visbou, usually Bo at the end of a name, means it's a boy, but this character is a girl. Sometimes people don't act like it though. At first her name was Shinobista. She's a kunoichi in training and ends her sentences with gozaru. She also has a screw on her head, but for some reason hers look like a shiitake mushroom. She is well seen with Vistake though. Childlike and innocent, she is given missions by the posters of Nijura, which she does carry out following the orders given, although the mission always ends up being known by Windows 95, to which the posters get punished by it. She knows how to use the ninja art, Big-Breasted Rori no Jutsu. She and Vistake are also seen with a dog-like creature who's always trembling and says "Annyeong" or "Annyeong." You can't really tell what it's feeling, and it's based on the Windows Longhorn logo. Ultima-san, name meant to represent Windows Vista Ultimate. She is an OS girl that wants to be pampered by the users, speaks like an Ojo-sama, and repeats herself, which quite annoys them. This comes from the fact that in Vista, when you open an executable file, the user account control asks you for permission on everything, and you have to hold its hand along the way. Even though she has a body like that, she's childlike, so she starts crying for whatever reason, and frequently screams for her mom, sometimes getting posters or whoever arrested for it. The ring on her head and around her torso are called ahorin, meaning stupid ring, and is based on the ring that spins when something is loading in Windows Vista. So the theory she's a busy dumb girl was born. Her body appearance changes depending on how many USB memory sticks are inserted on her head. 1 stick she becomes Rori mode, 2 or 3 sticks it's in between, 4 sticks she's drawn plump and called Una-tima. Una comes from the character Unaku, which is a morph between Unagi from Popotan and Izakujuru from Gundam Seed. Its creator at the time would draw a chubby Windows XP. You've seen some of these already, and from that, the body type will be described as Unai. Also has a rare red version representing Vista product red. Mihoshi comes from the kanjis beautiful, that can be read as B, and star, that can be read as sta, but together it's read as Mihoshi. She started as a magical girl OS stan, trying to become an idol, traveling around singing and dancing. But then, in August 31, 2007, Hatsune Miku was released, and due to having a big break in popularity, Mihoshi, who had a similar appearance to Miku, started being called Miku by other people, and as a result, she couldn't make a living unless she was imitating Miku. She did some department store rooftop shows, some neighborhood shows, sold some CDs, appeared on a suspicious show about haunted spots with the exorcist Nijura maid Harai-san. Not really any proper work, but she works hard. Whenever she's not doing idol activities, she does part-time. Due to always traveling, she doesn't meet the other OS ton much. Her weapon of choice is a Morning Star flail. She is accompanied by a square cow based on the codename Longhorn. The cow became her mascot and can be used as a briefcase. But eventually he went back to the ranch and was replaced by his son, who's round, and he started acting as Mihoshi's mascot, manager, and harasser, and together they keep traveling for work as she becomes more and more twisted herself. Visko is this little gremlin. Due to there being Yotsubato edits with the character, her personality became unlike Yotsuba's. Empty head with a V-shaped ahoge that heightens her stupid levels and is similar to Futaba's sapling. She has a dumb face that portrays her intelligence. She can grow butterfly wings and fly on the sky, although she gets tired fast, can take all sorts of things from her sleeves, like Doraemon. When she gets excited, she enters aero mode and her clothes become a little bit transparent. She calls ME her master and CE small master. She also has a twin called Navisko. She's a dumb brat, but she's a nice dumb brat. Mayvis is a Vista character designed on the May board, and with the gradual loss of steam on the Vista OS boom, she started disappearing but was later adopted in IMG as a big girl character. She is a 2-meter tall Ojo-sama who is bothered by her height, and her dream is to have her head petted. Has a lot of money but lives a simple life, is kind and mischievous, and she wants to feel needed by her users. She can transform into a masked muscle man called Cereb, who only says Cereb in this form. That she can do this is an open secret, but honestly it doesn't have to be her, the character can just appear sometimes. Gunvis is a military-themed OS who terrorizes the posters by trying to make them eat surströmming. I added this one because I thought it was kinda funny. There's not much more to say that I'm aware of. Anubista, also known as Kabegami. You probably heard before that kami can mean both god and paper. So the character is a play on wallpaper and wall god. He is one of the very few flat characters in Nijiura and appears in whatever wall or floor. His defining trait is that he enjoys smelling socks. This is Farabisu. This girl is seen a lot with Anubista. She as well is Egyptian themed and is a quite tall woman. She has a hard time speaking Japanese, usually her speech is portrayed by hieroglyphics, and her favorite food is ice cream. So Windows 7 comes out, and once again there is a rush to create a design, but it's around this version that the OS boom shows signs of dying down, so I'll mention real fast some of the characters that came out of it and I'll move on to the next topic. Yayakon is a half yokai fox, is almost always shown laughing and enjoying herself, but also seems to get embarrassed easily. Eventually she was turned much younger and is shown along her brother, who leads her into the path of becoming an OS. She also likes doing pranks. Secchan is an angel who is very kind and does things at her own pace. She is often portrayed with several arrows pointing out details on her. She is followed by these little winged blobs that are called machines, as in kissing machine or rubbing machine. They represent the posters of the boards. Secchan. She alongside the angel are the most popular Windows 7 OS stan in Futaba. She is scantily clothed and doesn't like wearing pants or skirts. Sometimes people try to put them on her. She becomes more embarrassed in being seen without her glasses than without pants. But besides all that, she's quite well behaved. It is claimed that her colors are based on the Windows 7 beta fish wallpaper, but she is clearly based on a joke that previously came up on the design Gold Rush, Ultra 7. And because of that, she's followed by Agira, Wingdom, and Miku, Ras, Funako-san and Nana-san. These two were designed on the idea of making clothing shaped like a 7 that came early on the Gold Rush. Both of them would have the 7 covering the important parts and everything else was transparent. I think along the way they became sisters. The older one gets embarrassed a lot and the younger one is shameless and into the older one. Ketsu-san, I think that's her name. She's another character whose clothing was based on a 7, this time it's the pants, and that was enough for some people. Nana. The only defining trait I've seen of this character is that she has abs. The first drawing was very specific about that, and that was enough for some people. Nanao-kun is the otokonoko design given for Windows 7, and just like the last ones, that's enough for some people. Not sure how to read her name, but it's written with the kanjis of 7 and C. Either way, people just call her Granny. She's a hard-boiled old lady pirate who traveled the 7 seas with a 7-shaped hook and a 7-shaped scar on her face. She is followed by Kairu-kun, the Japanese equivalent of Clippy, the Microsoft Office assistant, though he just makes fun of her and calls her old. Madobe Nanami is the official anime girl that represents Windows 7. I am only focusing this video on the characters that came from the Nijiuras in Futaba Channel, so I'm not really talking about that whole campaign, but she does appear very once in a while in Nijiura, and whenever she does, she is selling something. That's the joke. Nana-chan. This character is very similar to Windows 97, but where there was supposed to be 90 written on her forehead, there's just some tape, so it's probably not her. She was very adamant on becoming the OS stun that represents Windows 7. I really like this idiot. Now that I went through the Microsoft girls, I want to go back in time a little and talk about other characters that were developed alongside them. But first, I want to talk about another controversy. With the rise of popularity of the OS stun inside Futaba Channel, more elaborate works started coming out under the name of Trouble Windows. Trouble Windows. It was an imaginary manga setting where the OS stun would live with their master, Toshiaki, and the manga would be written by Futaba Toshiaki. Obviously by now you know this is a fake name. And that would lead to a fake media mix property with anime and games alike, and what would come out of this would make the popularity of these characters explode outside of the website. And of course, if something gets popular, people will start wanting to use them. The before mentioned Deja Vu Artworks controversy even led to people within Futaba to stop using the term OS stun and even the term tongue in general and start using OS musume, meaning OS girls, to differentiate who knew about these characters through Futaba and who knew them through outside sources. So enter SoftBank Publishing and their magazine Netrunner. The magazine would take materials made by the community and cause an influx of Netrunner fans to the website, as well as they having recommended and distributed a software called Berry, which mass downloaded images from Futaba, putting huge strain on their servers and taking them down. They were not liked at all by Futaba Channel members. One of the reasons even that Futaba members were mad at Deja Vu Artworks is because they discovered they had work published in Netrunner. Due to the server strains, the administrator of Futaba put a banner on the website that said "Netrunner forbidden, Netrunner freaks please return." And the name field was changed to "Netrunner freaks please return." And Futaba members almost crashed their own servers celebrating this. In the middle of the commotion, they even created a character representing the act of refusing Netrunner, called Okotowari. 3 months later, Netrunner sold their magazine with a Mitan card mimicking a Bikuriman card. The first point to be made is that the idea of plagiarism stickers called Bakuriman stickers was an idea born in Futaba, used by Netrunner, and they had previously done a card featuring another Futaba character. To add insult to the injury, they sourced the Mitan as a 2-channel character, and 2-channel had nothing to do with the creation of Mitan. And of course, this all made the relationship between Futaba and Netrunner even better. This led to the creators of Mitan and Windows XP coming forward and making the character's copyrights clear. Because the Mitan creator already had a website to claim ownership of the character due to Netrunner using that previous character, who at the very least was sourced to be from Futaba. For Futaba Channel and sites related, no problem at all. For doujinshi, sure, use common sense. But for SoftBank Company, absolutely not. They would seek legal repercussions if it happened again, and you can even see the banner on Mitan's creator website. So this was a very interesting story, but why exactly did I tell you that? This is Witan. She might be very similar to Mitan, but she's not Mitan. The story goes that after many things happened, the usage of Mitan was only allowed by Toshiakis. The problem arose when members of the Net character board wanted to use the character Mitan, but their default name for that board was Nanashi, meaning anonymous, so they were not Toshiaki, and so they did not have permission to use Mitan, so they created Witan with colors opposite of Mitan's. Of course, no one would complain if they used Mitan since they were still inside the website, but this is also part of the fun, and she became very popular in the board for a few days because she was born 5 days before the administrator removed the name Toshiaki from Nijiura due to them causing a lot of trouble, so she had no reason to exist anymore. But due to a doujinshi of her being released called Wichan Book, where she was portrayed as a normal girl who lost her place and wanted to become an OS, the setting of her wanting to become an OS but not being able to due to being a normal human was born and embraced. She is a girl from the country who went to Nijiura inheriting the will of her father who wanted to become a DOS, but she doesn't see much success in her mission. Because she's just a normal person, she has a normal name. It is Uijima Taeko. People just call her Taeko. When Nintendo released the Wii, she compromised in becoming a game console, but deep in her heart, she hasn't given up yet. There's a theory her hair isn't actually pink, and she's wearing a wig because it makes her look more like an OS girl. She also ends up her sentences with Zura, which can sound like wig in Japanese. There was a time she was hated by Windows 2000 because she kept asking her the secrets on how to become an OS, but 2000 wanted to become a normal person but couldn't due to being an OS. Because she speaks in a countryside accent, people think she comes from the same region as the Nijiura-made Modoe-san. She is capable enough that she can create her own OS, and due to her abilities, she became a temporary employee of the company known as the Empire Commercial Affairs, where she works in charge of the network and server system. The server is portrayed as an actual Windows server that lives in the company's server room, who is raised by Taeko. Yamada-san was originally designed as a Windows 98 character, but someone pointed out how she looks more like a Yamada, and when people noted that when you turn the Windows 98 logo sideways, you can read it as Yamada, and so officially her name became Yamada. Kuzuha Yamada is her full name. Kuzuha came from a broken way of saying 98, which means 98. She went from an OS character to someone who could be mistaken as an OS but isn't. She also works on the Empire Commercial Affairs and lives on the place known as Nijiura Dormitory, which actually was previously the junk dormitory run by Windows 3.1. The place is a 60-story building where several Nijiura characters live in, and she lives on the first floor alongside Taeko. The story goes that when Taeko's true form was revealed, she lost her identity, and it was Yamada-san who helped her get back on her feet. Another member who is well seen with them is Asta-san, a character based on Astaroth from Shinra Bansho, who wears weird shirts, and Spider-Man, who goes by Spidey and lives in the ceiling. Breast envy character. The big majority of the jokes around her is her being conscious about that. Yamada-san can be seen as a sort of main character when it comes to the Empire Commercial Affairs and the Nijiura Dormitory due to being just a normal human in a sea of supernatural creatures. She and Secchan are on friendly terms, probably because they're both flat. Originally, Pizza was simply a one-off joke, just a girl who was meant to be Pizza, but someone said I can only see her as a second-player color variation of 2000, while posting a picture of the character hitting Windows 2000 with a smile on her face. She became a character that hits people and things with her palm attack that always comes with a dong. She also likes to say pia. Due to her origins, she specifically fought more against 2000, sometimes just harassing her for no reason, and sometimes things escalated so much they would have gunfights. That's right, she has guns. But of course, there's also the theory that she does like 2000, she just isn't good at expressing it. She is able to clone herself due to an incident where she was eaten by XP. Komepo is XP's second player color character. She was born from a thread where someone drew XP raging and becoming Super Saiyan because there was no breakfast. And posters on the thread started reading her XP hair clip as both the hiragana po and the kanji for rice. Rice is read as kome. She became komepo. She really loves Japanese rice, and despite being American, she also likes sake. She eats as much as XP does, and of course, she can turn Super Saiyan. She used to be a cheerleader and came to Japan as an exchange student. She moved to the Nijura dormitory. She has a very bad relationship with pizza due to being a hardcore rice lover, and she welcome you to the rice fields. If there's no one to harvest the rice, there's no rice to be eaten. She also has a sister called Zenbei-san. The kanji for rice can represent the United States, which fits Komepo. But on Zenbei-san's case, it stands for the reading, the entire United States. She is a crybaby and based on the line well used in movie advertisements. The whole United States have cried. She cries when people forget about her even though she's a very minor character. This one's a weird derivative character. This is an alien that came from space in a shooting star, and the first thing it saw was a dog, so it took its shape. It is a character that was created from the idea of removing all dog-like features from Inu-T. Eventually this thing became a maid for the sake of understanding humans better and was faced with Kusai-san, the Woodlands monster maid, because it turns out their species are enemies, but they decided not to fight on Earth due to the damage they would cause to it. So here's some side characters that didn't have much appearance. Linux. Two versions were created. First a penguin girl, but then she was turned into a penguin creature. There is a design for Linspire, previously known as Lindos, before Microsoft sued, but she didn't appear much. Norton-sensei is a sleazy doctor old man who gets real close to the OS girls on the pretense of doing virus checks, based on Norton antivirus. Trend Micro's Virus Buster is a little brat, although he was shown to have a good relationship with XP. McAfee is a dignified older lady, a huge contrast to the last two. These three were the antivirus's personifications created at the start of the OS ton boom, but only Norton saw more use. There's some other designs for DOS like this shy girl and this girl in a bodysuit, they also didn't appear much. There is another version of Windows 98 2nd edition. Could be a relative or just a kid in the neighborhood, has a vertical flag on her back and fights with it, has too much energy and runs at full speed. If she stops, she dies, not literally. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into another group of characters. If there are OS-themed girls, it is only natural that people would eventually create OS-themed boys. People with different tastes had different needs, and initially they were born from the yaoi board, but they were later adopted in Nijura and got the Nijura treatment as well. 2000 Nee-san was the first OS boy. At first, he was portrayed as a conspiring character that desired power, an intellectual reflected in his design, and a counterpart to 2000's reliable woman archetype. But as he went from the yaoi board to Nijura, he started becoming stupid. A character that can't read the atmosphere at all, say unnecessary remarks, and things that causes damage to other people without realizing. But it's hard to hate on the guy. He also works on the Empire Commercial Affairs Company and has good friends there, usually in the form of the character Eigyoseki, one of the derivative Rosen Maiden characters. And he is in love with another of the Rosen Maiden derivative characters, Daiginjo, who is the owner of a bar called Shimon Heart, a play on bar Lemon Heart. It is a bar that several Nijura characters frequent. He has proposed to her, but that wasn't well received, so that matter became unsettled. Mibo is the counterpart to Mita. He doesn't freeze much or at all. He is portrayed as a young boy detective due to the appearance first given to him. He has one-sided feelings towards Mita, but decided not to cross that line, and from that, he started a relationship with Taeko, who looks just like his sister instead. But then he became a womanizer to the dismay of Taeko and some of the posters on the board. Musubi comes from Musuko XP, Musuko meaning son. And his design comes from when the OS Stun XP was being drawn. Some people joked XP was more robust and strong compared to the kind and soft design given, and people drew a muscled XP which was adopted when the boy versions started being done. He is a meathead with a XP-shaped scar on his chest, and he loves training. He has a Musco friend in the form of Double Musco, the cow owned by the Nijura maid Medoe-san. He is sturdy enough to handle Pizza's attacks with a smile on his face, and because of that, they both started going out. He seems to be the only XP pro that kept a presence in Nijura, but there were other versions, and they worked as a sort of Sentai squad. They were XP Red, XP Olive, and XP Silver. Oichi-sama, Windows 3.1. Similarly to his sister, he can't do things by himself, so he has his own version of a DOS that keeps him company. He is an old man, and because of that, he fought for the position of old man character in Nijura against the Emperor, one of the 10 great of Nijura. In cheerleading contests, this picture is cropped. He took part in the Great OS War, but after the war ended, he retired and doesn't get to appear much, but he does visit the OS house once in a while. 95 Nee-san. He's easygoing but skilled at the sword. He can be pretty reliable, but he is almost always seen chilling and mainly drinking. He has a drinking partner in Akachochin, one of the Rosen Maiden derivative characters, who's not human nor a doll, but simply an alcohol-drinking yokai. After being continuously pestered by Itai-san, the Chunin Nijura maid, he became her master in the matter of swordsmanship. Windows 98 Hacchan. He was an OS created for fighting purposes, developed at the final stages of the Great OS War, and can transform into the so-called Musk the Vulcan, and would also frequently be the hero side in histories where 2000 was the villain. Although after the war he hadn't had many chances to turn into a hero, so he has done some side jobs like in hero shows, but then started just spending his days doing nothing of purpose, watching anime, going to game centers or to pachinko with money given to him by Oichi-sama. He started being seen with scornful eyes by Hacchan, who started calling him only by unemployed. But there's people hoping their relationship gets better. Windows 98 2nd edition, just like his brother, he was also created for fighting purposes in the Great OS War, but he had fallen in the hands of evil and was thought to have died. Later, it was found out he was alive and running a coffee shop near the OS house. He sees Hacchan as more than a brother. Homeko is the contrast to XP Home. He is a timid shota that likes Yuri. He is made to be the model of the yaoi books Homeko creates, made to be her assistant, help sell the books, made to cross-dress, although he seems to enjoy that regardless. He is a very bullyable character that gets pushed around a lot, sometimes even pushed down, usually by 98 with an USB attached. Although with Mebo, apparently he's the same. He started cross-dressing and going to the Maid Academy middle school and joined Itai-san's group of friends, although his true form is a secret. To his dismay, since he developed a crush on one of his friends, he is a prime target for Secchan's plucking. The key on his head represents the log-off icon on Windows XP. Pizza Nee, full name Pizza Nee Don Tacos, is the counterpart to Pizza and her older brother. He inherited the original 2000 Nee-san setting and was created as a villain, the mastermind behind the scenes who uses her sister as a simple pawn. He is extremely powerful, but is also romantically interested in 2000 Nee-san and tries to court him to the point he cross-dresses for it. Shinzo is one of the Windows Vistas. He is the older brother to Vistake. He used to be a host, but now works as an illustrator and thinks fondly of her little sister, so he doesn't forgive anyone who makes her cry. He lives outside the OS house and doesn't come back a lot, but when he does, he takes a look at Vistake's drawings. This Nee The other Windows Vista boy, older brother to Visbou, thinks fondly of her little sister, so he doesn't forgive anyone who makes her cry. He is a ninja that is currently in training, and due to that, he sleeps in the ceiling of the OS house and usually appears from it. Because he is usually hiding, he doesn't get to appear too much. Alright, so these were the OS boys. It is time to talk about the last OS group. The Microsoft vs Apple brand wars in Nijiura was represented by tales of an actual war, as you might have inferred by now. That means there were also Mac OS characters created. Capone is based on Mac OS Kanji Talk 7.5, Japanese version of the Mac OS. Her name is based on the codename Capone. She's the oldest Mac OS of the family and took part on the Great OS War, being Windows 95's mortal enemy, who she fought against evenly with her Thompson machine guns, as well as against Oobaba-sama. After the war, she opened a restaurant and eventually retired to the Narojin home, a play on narrowband frequency and retirement home, alongside Oobaba-sama and Midorikawa. Similarly to 95 comments, calling her a granny can be shown with bullet marks in them. Sonata-sensei represents Mac OS 9 codenamed Sonata. She's calm, peaceful, and doesn't get flustered much. The reason why she's called Sensei is because she works as a painting teacher, representing Mac's image processing abilities, which also led to the setting that she was raised properly like an Ojo-sama. Compared to Windows, Mac had extremely limited choices for eroge, so it was decided that she was a virgin. She also had her share of animosity towards the Windows OS. She used to fistfight Windows 2000 on the riverbed until sunset. Xiang is the first macOS character to be conceived. She carries apples on her head that she can turn into bombs, that represents the bomb icon whenever a system error occurred. In contrast to her sister, she hated formalities, so she became a raw character that doesn't hesitate in expressing herself and is very belligerent. People liked to joke that they didn't remember her or didn't know her. Kuro-kun also doesn't have many appearances and is a pretty early character. His name can be read as hardship and he works hard behind the scenes. Usually when he appeared, he was alongside Mitan in a quite friendly relationship that could also be seen as the start of something more. The Tiger Brothers represent the Mac OS 10.0 to 10.4, codenames Cheetah, Puma, Jaguar, Panther, and Tiger. They are in no way related to the other character Tiger. They are a group of macho men who were trained by Capone to the point they won't die even if they're killed. They adore their sister Sonata-sensei and are usually screaming, "Sis! Is moe moe!" They frequently speak one sentence each at a time. When they were young, they had normal heads, but as they grew up, their heads became that of animals. Leobo represents Mac OS 10.5, Leopard. In contrast to his brothers, he is still a young boy, and due to that he's well pampered by Sonata-sensei, and sometimes by Farabisu. He frequently goes to the OS house to cause mischief and to fight/play with Visbou, and he probably was influenced by her, so he also finishes his sentences with Gozaru. Also tries to catch the attention of the posters who live in the house, and a lot of things happen when he goes there. A lot of attention given, a lot of friendship happening that usually ends with 95 cutting down someone. The doors to the PP land are open. Why? Some other members of the OS family is Mac 10.6 Yukihyo-chan, which means Snow Leopard, Leopold's little sister. There's a baby that represents Mac OS Classic. It's a baby, so it doesn't do much. There's quite literally just the original Mac OS logo with a body, also doesn't do much. And I think this might be enough regarding characters. Right now, I want to talk just really fast about one last piece of trouble regarding the trouble windows. Around 2005, 2005, an official manga release of Trouble Windows was announced in the website Netagugenka Inkai, who had a history of making Futaba-related goods with the collaboration of the original creators, and later on Futaba, the administrator made an announcement as well. When posters learned about this, they weren't really raving about it, and at first people were questioning the owner of the goods website. It was only 4 days later that the person behind it, an editor for Dengeki Taiyo, announced this, not on Futaba but on their personal blog, claiming it was not official and simply using the magazine as a way to create a derivative work, and they wanted to set the precedent of a proper use of online characters in a commercial setting. You have to remember this was after Netrunner, claiming they got the permission of the original creators, had them check the storyboards and got the administrator of Futaba to announce it as well. People thought they were acting dishonest. He did wrote that the negative reaction was within expected. While getting showered with criticism, he started clapping back and arguing with people, and eventually became too much, so he went into hiding. People thought it was weird that someone responsible for such a project would act like that, so lots of mails to media works who released the Dengeki magazines were sent. A few days later, there was another blog post explaining his statements, but at this point he had already lost the people, and there were apparent communication issues with the artists due to using the goods site as an intermediary. By the way, none of the original creators accepted royalties, claiming the characters were created by everyone. Afterwards, there was a new post, quite a short one. The editorial department of the magazine received the emails. The manga was still going to be published, but they apologized for all the problems caused. And so, in Dengeki Taiyo Volume 5, the manga for Trouble Windows was released, drawn by Kurihashi Shinsuke, who did go to Futaba, but his main board was the modeling one, and not Nijura, where these characters came from. And then it was announced it was going to be a single chapter, and they scrapped the whole idea. A week later, the editor appeared as a guest on an event celebrating the release of the book Denpa Otoko by Toru Honda, where he said, "Anyone who have a problem, come at me bro," regarding the whole OS-tan ordeal. And that was the end of that. Well, it seems that with Trouble Windows there really is only trouble happening. But if you look at what's claimed as official releases related to the OS-tan, you can see there are two pieces of work. The second one was released a few months after the Dengeki Taiyo one, and it's called Trouble Windows OS-tan Fanbook. And there was even an anti-Netrunner logo slapped right on the box. It came with 3 little figures, Mitan, 95 and XP, with empty room to put a 2000 figure, which was sold separately by Netagugenka Inkai. In a sea of trouble, this was a very nice book. Released through Ozora Publishing, who in no way claimed to own anything within the book, it was a joint collaboration of over 25 Toshiakis, people who posted on Futaba, with illustrations, comics, inside jokes and references. For example, the person who made this comic is the same person who made that Witan Dojinshi I mentioned previously. The anthology even starts not with the OS-tan, but with the other big source of Nijura original characters, the 2 first Nijura maids Medoi-san and Modoi-san. As Modoi-san gets annoyed at her computer running Windows ME, and Norton-sensei comes out of it to give a very detailed history of the OS-tan. The message on the start of the book even acknowledged past controversies, saying it may not be wise to call the members of Nijura monkeys or just some anonymous people while using these characters created and developed by them. It was properly made, I've seen no sort of complaints at all from it. It is the officially approved Futaba Channel OS-tan book. I hope you learned something from all this, and if not, I at the very least hope you were entertained by it. There is a saying that I saw a few times while researching this. There are as many OS girls as there are Toshiaki, because ultimately all these characters were created as collaborative efforts by users. Designs were tuned from suggestions, personalities through stories posted. Remember, the original artists rejected royalties because of this. There's no real specification to these characters. It is mostly what the community decided to go with, and a lot of things could change on a whim. And each person will have their own interpretation of them. I call this a guide, but due to the free-flowing nature surrounding these characters, it might have been more of a peek into a very interesting community who created all these characters with the pure intent of just having fun. And I had fun learning about them. This video was long and took a toll on me. I'm going to sleep now, see ya!